I'm Welton Gaddy. Welcome to State of Belief, continuing coverage of the 2020 Democratic National Convention across America. The Right Reverend Mariann Budde is the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C. In agreeing to address the convention, she joins an impressive list of faith leaders and activists to be highlighted by the Democratic Party this year. I am honored to have Bishop joining us in this time. Bishop Budde, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
In preparation for the 2000 Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles, Vice President Gore asked the suffragan bishop in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington pro tem to speak at the convention. You need to know that Bishop Jane Holmes Dixon, the second woman ever consecrated as a bishop in the Episcopal Church, was one of the best friends I ever had. I still miss her.
Me too. Me too.
She and I spent a good bit of time discussing whether or not she should accept that invitation. Thankfully, she ultimately said yes, well aware that some people would argue that a bishop shouldn't be on the platform of the Democratic or Republican convention. Bishop Budde, I've been around you enough to know you have the same integrity. I think it would be very helpful if you would share with us why you are on the program for the DNC and how you want people to understand your presence and what you want to say.
Well, thank you. First of all, to be in a conversation where Bishop Dixon is evoked in memory and in friendship is a privilege, and I share that friendship with you.
Good.
Keep in mind, I was asked to offer a benediction, which is a brief prayer at the end of a public ceremony. It's a customary role for religious people to play, and is one that, as the Bishop of Washington, I'm called to do from time to time in a number of settings. So it wasn't as far off. It wasn't as if I was asked to give a 25-minute address to the convention. In fact, 1 minute was the time frame. So that was the first thing that I kept in mind. I gave it considerable thought. Like Bishop Dixon, I consulted with a few key colleagues and advisors because I understand the risks of stepping into a partisan context. So all of that was very much in my mind. I'm also not naive. I know the reason that I was asked to speak was because I was part of a very public critique of the president just a few months ago. So all of that in mind. So I, in the end, determined that I would accept on the proviso that I could, in my conscience, say, if the Republican National Convention invited me to pray, that I would offer the exact same prayer. So that was the first thing that I said, and I had to say that to myself in real honesty, not in a flip sort of way. It was the first thing. And the second thing is that I felt it was important, and particularly in this environment, to offer a witness to the Christian faith that is more expansive than can be perceived in the wider public in this country at the moment. That if you say Christian leader in this country, it can evoke an image or a posture that is an expression of one aspect of the wide spectrum of Christian engagement in public life. And I personally believe, in many ways, a distorted one. And I welcomed the opportunity to provide an example of what I believe an appropriate engagement in public life is. And we can talk more about that if you like, but that's one of the reasons why I accepted.
Did you get any kickback?
Yeah, I did. Predictable in the tone. Some people are still quite angry with me for my critique of the president, and felt that I was out of line, and so this was yet one more extension of that. Others have said, and I think there's legitimacy to their point of view, that it's inappropriate for a religious leader to step into that partisan environment. So I got a little bit of both.
Well, I want to go there because when I talked about integrity with Jane and then talked about integrity with you, an extension of that integrity came forward to me as I watched what you did at St. John's. So you spoke out boldly about the St. John's Bible photo op incident, even in the pages of the New York Times. Why was that so important to you? And I am going to be presumptuous and say, if anybody knows anything about Christianity and the prophetic part of Christianity, they know it. But I want to hear you say it as well.
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure that everyone does. It's not necessarily a part of the Christian tradition that is one we lean into all the time. But it is, I think, an important one. Very briefly, I felt that in walking across and standing in front of St. John's Church with a Bible, the context is very important, having stated in the Rose Garden the president's intention to use military force against protesting Americans, and then clearing the park with forcible means to walk across the park. So that's very important. I felt that the president was assuming a spiritual mantle of authority for his actions, and indeed his entire presidency, that I felt was wildly inappropriate, first of all, and didn't belong to him. And as the nearest I had legitimacy. It wasn't as if he was stepping onto a religious terrain for which I had no authority. And so I thought it was mine to say that we separated ourselves from that action. And also to say, had the president, because we invite civic leaders into spiritual spaces all the time, had the president used that a moment to offer a word of condolence, to read from the Bible, to try to bring some calm at a moment when the country was, it was a very tense and stressed moment, and all kinds of things were happening that were very frightening. If he had used that moment, we would have gladly shared the spiritual space with him in that way. But that was not his purpose, and that was why I spoke the way I did.
Thank you for sharing that, and I think it is certainly a mark of your reasonableness and your integrity as well as in what you do. One other question, what should people be listening for in the remaining hours of the Democratic National Convention? What are you listening for?
Well, and I would say the same thing for the Republican convention, which is coming shortly. I would listen for the leadership that has a grounded commitment to the well-being of the majority of all Americans, and also has the maturity and the strength of conviction and the ability to bring disparate and arguably polarized people together toward objectives of common good. And the pandemic has demonstrated that this is not a aspirational exercise. This is essential to our survival, and that we've been given a sobering test case that demonstrates our interdependence upon one another. That in fact the disparities we have allowed to grow in our country have devastating consequences for everybody, not merely those that the majority of society has deemed disposable, and that there's a reckoning. And so I'm listening for the leadership and the posture that would allow more people to participate in the healing and the reconciling, the reckoning and the moving forward of our country. So.
The Right Reverend Mariann Budde is Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Look for more of our convention coverage, including interviews with leaders, activists, and delegates all week at stateofbelief.com. I'm Welton Gaddy. Thanks for watching.